All right, get ready, because we're about to take a deep dive today into the world of the TGF-beta superfamily. And, you sent over some really cool research on these proteins.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and how they basically act like, these tiny puppet masters that are
Interesting.
kind of shaping everything from how our tissues grow
Huh.
to, how they stay in balance throughout our lives.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great way to put it. These signaling pathways are really essential for, life as we know it.
Right, we're talking about proteins that are controlling things like cell growth and development, immune responses.
Right.
Like the list just goes on and on. But here's the thing that really kind of caught my eye, is that these TGF-beta proteins, these seem to be kind of a double-edged sword.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where they can keep things running smoothly, but then if their signaling gets messed up,
Uh-oh.
all sorts of problems can arise.
Exactly. You can think of it kind of like a car, where you need the gas pedal and the brakes working in harmony. And if you have too much gas or not enough braking, you're going to be headed for trouble.
Okay, that's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
So let's break down this superfamily a little bit.
Mm.
What exactly is the TGF-beta superfamily?
Okay.
And why should we care so much about these, they're tiny proteins?
Yeah, they're tiny but mighty, right.
Right.
So the TGF-beta superfamily, it's a large group of proteins, and they're all structurally related. And what they all do is they act as signaling molecules.
Okay.
So they're like messengers that communicate between cells, basically telling them what to do.
Like a cellular postal service.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so what kind of messages are they delivering?
Well, all kinds of important stuff. They carry signals that tell cells to grow,
Okay.
divide, specialize into different types,
Huh.
or even self-destruct, like when it's time.
Wow.
And what's fascinating is that, these signals can have opposite effects depending on the context.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, it all comes down to, which specific ligand is involved, the receiving cell,
Okay.
and the environment within the cell itself.
Okay.
So, for example, TGF-beta can sometimes inhibit cell growth, acting like a brake.
Right.
But in other cases, it can actually promote growth, acting like that gas pedal we talked about.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. So we've got these messengers. You've been calling them ligands.
Right.
So what are some of the key players in this TGF-beta superfamily?
Well, you've got your TGF-betas themselves,
Okay.
which, kind of gave the whole family its name.
Right.
And they're big players in things like tissue repair and immune regulation.
Okay.
Then there are the bone morphogenetic proteins,
Uh-huh.
or BMPs, which are essential for bone formation.
Right.
And let's not forget the activins, which are involved in hormone production and cell differentiation.
Wow, a real all-star lineup.
Yeah.
So each of these ligands has its own specific job to do, kind of like specialized postal workers delivering different types of mail.
Exactly. And just like mail needs a specific address, each ligand has its own set of receptors it binds to on the surface of cells. And these receptors, they act like the mailboxes receiving those specific messages.
Okay, so that's how the message gets from outside of the cell to the inside.
It's amazing how this all works at such a tiny scale. Can we zoom in on these receptors for a sec?
Sure.
What do they actually look like,
Okay.
and how do they work?
So imagine them as these complex structures that are embedded in the cell membrane.
Okay.
And they're typically composed of two different subunits called type I and type 2 receptors.
So two subunits. So it's kind of like a two-part lock.
Yeah.
That needs both keys to open.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Okay.
So the ligand acts as the first key, binding to the type 2 receptor. And then this binding, it recruits a type I receptor to join the party, forming a complex.
So it's a real team effort.
It is.
So what happens once this receptor complex is assembled?
Does the message magically get inside the cell at that point?
Not magically,
Yeah.
but it's pretty amazing.
Okay.
Once the complex is formed, the type 2 receptor activates the type I receptor. Think of it like flipping a switch
Okay.
to power up the system.
I'm picturing like a tiny light bulb turning on inside the cell.
Yeah.
What happens next? How does this signal actually change what the cell is doing?
So this is where things get really interesting. The activated type I receptor sets off this chain reaction inside the cell, activating a group of proteins called SMADs.
SMA days, that's a new one.
Yeah.
What do they do?
So think of SMADs like messengers that are carrying instructions from the receptor to the cell's control center, the nucleus.
Okay.
And it's not just one type of SMAD. There are receptor-regulated SMADs,
Oh.
or RSMADs, which get directly activated by the receptor. And then there's a common mediator, SMADA, or co-SMAD, which partners up with the RSMAd.
Okay, so it's kind of like a relay race. The activated receptor passes the baton to the RSMAs,
Right.
and they grab their partner co-SMAD, and they run the message all the way to the nucleus.
Exactly. And once inside the nucleus, these SMAD complexes bind to DNA
Okay.
and regulate gene expression, basically turning certain genes on or off.
Hold on, this is blowing my mind.
It's pretty cool, right?
Yeah. So we've got this tiny protein, the ligand. It binds to a receptor on the cell surface that triggers this cascade of events, activating these SMAD proteins, which then travel all the way to the nucleus and change which genes are being used.
Precisely. It's a remarkable feat of, molecular communication.
Yeah.
And a testament to the incredible complexity of, biological systems.
It really makes you appreciate all those intricate processes happening inside us every second, right?
Right.
But with all this talk about complex signaling and gene regulation, why does it matter in the grand scheme of things?
That's a good point.
How does this TGF-beta superfamily actually impact our bodies?
Well, that's what we're going to explore next. These pathways aren't just some abstract concept. They play a vital role in keeping us alive and functioning.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's dive into that.
So we know these TGF-beta pathways are pretty important. They're not just some, abstract concept. But how do they actually impact our bodies?
Right, that's the million-dollar question. I mean, it's all well and good understanding the nuts and bolts of how these signals work on a cellular level. But I'm curious about the bigger picture. What roles do these pathways play in keeping us alive and kicking?
Well, for starters, they're absolutely essential for development.
Yeah.
You can think of them as like the master architects that shape a building.
Mm-hmm.
From the very first stages of embryonic development, these signals are guiding how cells divide and specialize and even arrange themselves to create all the tissues and organs in our bodies.
Wow. So they're literally laying the foundation for life.
They are.
That's incredible.
And it doesn't stop there. Once our bodies are built, these pathways, they don't just clock out. They continue to work tirelessly throughout our lives to maintain homeostasis.
Homeostasis, that's all about balance, right? Keeping everything running smoothly on the inside.
Exactly. Think of it kind of like a thermostat that's constantly making tiny adjustments to keep the temperature just right.
Bill.
TGF-beta signaling helps regulate things like cell growth and death, making sure that tissues and organs maintain the right size and function even as we age.
It's like this constant dance between creation and destruction, keeping everything in harmony.
Right.
I'm starting to see why these pathways are so crucial, but we talked earlier about, those global signals and how researchers now think that it's more like a city with different neighborhoods. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. You're referring to the idea of signaling microdomains. You see, for a long time, scientists, they thought that these signaling molecules, like cyclic AMP, just diffused evenly throughout the cell, activating their targets, wherever they encountered them. It was like sending out a general announcement over a loudspeaker.
Right, I remember you comparing it to like a flood that just washes over everything.
Exactly. But that didn't really explain why different receptors on the same cell could trigger the same pathway but produce different effects.
Yeah.
It's like sending the same message to two different houses in the same city and getting two completely different responses.
Right. That's a great point. So what's the alternative? How can the same signal have different effects within the same cell?
Well, researchers started to realize that these signaling pathways weren't as uniform as they initially thought. It's not just one big flood, it's more like a city with distinct neighborhoods, each with its own set of rules.
Okay. So instead of loudspeaker announcement, it's more like targeted deliveries to specific addresses.
Precisely. These neighborhoods are called microdomains, and they're created by a group of proteins called A-kinase anchoring proteins, or AKPs.
AKPs, okay, that's another one for the glossary. What do these AKPs do?
So AKPs act like organizers, bringing together different components of the signaling pathway and anchoring them to specific locations within the cell. It's like having designated mailrooms in each neighborhood, ensuring that deliveries go to the right place.
That makes so much more sense. So these AKPs help create these microdomains, and that allows the same signal to have different effects, depending on which neighborhood it's delivered to.
Exactly. And it's not just about location, the composition of these microdomains, the specific proteins that are present. That can also vary depending on the cell type and its environment. It's like each neighborhood having its own unique culture and set of customs.
Wow, that's incredible. It really adds another layer of complexity to how we understand cell signaling. But, I can't help but think that with all this intricate machinery at play, things are bound to go wrong sometimes. What happens when these TGF-beta pathways get disrupted?
Well, that's when we start to see a whole range of diseases. from cancer to fibrosis to immune disorders.
Okay, now we're getting into the serious stuff. Can we dive into some specific examples of how TGF-beta signaling goes awry and what the consequences are?
Absolutely. Let's start with cancer. We talked earlier about how TGF-beta has this, kind of dual role,
Right?
acting as both a brake and a gas pedal for cell growth.
Yeah.
Well, in cancer, this delicate balance, it can be completely thrown off.
So it's like the car is stuck with one foot on the gas and the other on the brake at the same time.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, that can't be good.
So in the early stages of cancer, TGF-beta can actually help suppress tumor growth by inhibiting cell proliferation and promoting cell death. It's like trying to keep those rogue cells under control. But as the tumor progresses, things can take a dark turn.
So the cancer cells find a way to override the brakes.
Exactly. They can develop resistance to TGF-beta's growth inhibitory effects, or even hijack those signals for their own benefit.
That's devious. How do they manage to do that?
Well, they can do things like reduce the number of TGF-beta receptors on their surface, making them less sensitive to those stop signals, or they can develop mutations in the signaling pathway itself, rendering those brakes ineffective.
So it's like cutting the brake lines altogether.
In a way, yeah. And what's even more sinister is that they can actually start using TGF-beta to promote their own growth and spread.
Wait, seriously? They turn the brake into a gas pedal.
Exactly. You see, TGF-beta has a role in promoting angiogenesis, which is the formation of new blood vessels, so the cancer cells can exploit this to create a blood supply for their growing tumor.
So it's like they're building their own highway system to escape and colonize other parts of the body. That's pretty terrifying.
It is. And unfortunately, this hijacking of TGF-beta signaling, it's a hallmark of many aggressive cancers.
Wow, that's really sobering. It really makes you appreciate the intricate balance that keeps our bodies healthy
Yeah.
and how easily things can go wrong when that balance is disrupted.
Absolutely. And it really highlights the importance of research that's aimed at understanding these pathways in detail so that we can develop new strategies to combat diseases like cancer.
That's a great point. So we talked about cancer. What about other diseases that are linked to TGF-beta signaling? You mentioned fibrosis earlier. What's happening there?
Right. So fibrosis is a condition where excessive scar tissue forms in organs, disrupting their normal function.
Okay, so instead of healing properly, the body just keeps building up scar tissue.
Exactly. And TGF-beta plays a key role in this process. Remember how it stimulates the production of collagen, a major component of scar tissue? Well, in fibrosis, this production, it goes into overdrive. It's like the body's repair mechanisms get stuck in a loop, laying down more and more collagen, even when it's not needed.
So it's like a construction crew that keeps building even after the house is finished.
That's a perfect analogy. And this excessive collagen deposition, it can have serious consequences,
Oh, no.
leading to organ damage and even failure.
That sounds pretty scary.
Yeah.
What organs are typically affected by fibrosis?
Well, fibrosis can affect a wide range of organs, including the lungs, liver, kidneys, and heart.
So it's a widespread problem. And is there any way to prevent or treat fibrosis?
Well, unfortunately, there are limited treatment options for fibrotic diseases. Right now, the main focus is on managing symptoms and slowing down the progression of the disease.
But there's hope for the future, right?
Yeah.
With all the research going on.
Absolutely. Scientists are working hard to develop new therapies that target specific components of the TGF-beta signaling pathway, with the goal of halting or even reversing fibrosis.
That would be amazing. It's inspiring to see how science is constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Speaking of pushing boundaries, what about the immune system? You mentioned that TGF-beta can contribute to immune disorders as well.
Yes, that's right. TGF-beta has a complex and multifaceted role in the immune system.
Okay.
It can both suppress and promote immune responses depending on the context.
So it's back to that double-edged sword analogy.
Exactly. In a healthy immune system, TGF-beta helps maintain tolerance, preventing the immune system from attacking the body's own tissues.
Right, because we don't want our immune systems going rogue and attacking healthy cells.
Exactly. But in some autoimmune diseases, this tolerance mechanism goes awry, and the immune system starts attacking healthy tissues.
Oh. And TGF-beta can contribute to this problem.
It can. In some cases, TGF-beta signaling can become suppressed, allowing those self-reactive immune cells to run wild.
Okay.
In other cases, TGF-beta signaling might be enhanced, leading to excessive inflammation and tissue damage.
Wow, it's really hard to wrap your head around how one protein can have such diverse effects, both beneficial and harmful.
It really highlights the importance of balance,
Right.
in biological systems.
Right.
Too much or too little of anything can disrupt that delicate equilibrium and lead to problems.
So it's all about finding that Goldilocks zone, just the right amount of signaling to keep everything running smoothly. But I'm curious, how do researchers actually study these pathways? It's not like we can just peer inside a cell and watch these proteins in action.
That's true. It's not quite that simple, but scientists have developed incredibly sophisticated tools and techniques to investigate these intricate processes.
Like what? Give me a peek behind the curtain of TGF-beta research.
Well, one common approach is to use cell cultures, where cells are grown in a dish and treated with various ligands or inhibitors to see how they respond.
So it's like a controlled environment where they can manipulate the signals and observe the effects.
Yes. Exactly. And researchers can also use genetic engineering techniques to create cells or animals with specific mutations in genes that are related to the TGF-beta pathway.
Okay, so they can create models that mimic certain diseases
Right.
or help them understand the function of specific proteins.
Precisely. And with, advancements in imaging technology, scientists can now visualize these signaling events in real time, tracking the movement of proteins within cells.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like having a microscopic camera crew filming a molecular drama.
It really is. And these tools, they're constantly evolving, allowing us to delve deeper into the complexities of TGF-beta signaling and unlock its secrets.
This is all so fascinating. But before we get lost in the research rabbit hole, I want to circle back to those three key ligands we talked about earlier: TGF-beta, BMP, and activin. You mentioned that they each have their own, kind of specialized roles. Can we take a closer look at how they differ?
Absolutely. Let's start with TGF-beta itself. It's often considered the founding member of the superfamily, and it's involved in a wide range of processes, including cell growth, differentiation, wound healing, and immune regulation.
That's a bit of a jack of all trades.
You could say that. It's involved in so many different aspects of biology, it's hard to pin down just one defining role. But one thing that's clear is that TGF-beta is essential for maintaining tissue integrity and responding to injury. So like when you cut yourself, TGF-beta is one of the first responders, helping to control bleeding, promote clotting, and initiate the healing process.
That's amazing. So every time I get a paper cut, I can thank TGF-beta for coming to the rescue.
Exactly. It's working tirelessly behind the scenes to keep our bodies functioning properly.
Okay, so TGF-beta is like the versatile workhorse of the superfamily.
Right.
What about BMPs? You mentioned that they're involved in bone formation.
That's right. BMPs are essential for the development and maintenance of our skeletons. They signal through specific receptors on bone-forming cells called osteoblasts, stimulating them to differentiate and produce the bone matrix.
So they're like the foreman on a construction site,
Yeah.
directing the building of our bones.
That's a great analogy. And it's not just about building new bone. BMPs are also involved in bone repair, helping to mend fractures and maintain bone density throughout our lives.
Wow, so they're crucial for keeping our skeletons strong and healthy. Okay, that leaves us with activins. What are their special talents?
So activins are a bit more specialized than TGF-beta or BMPs. They're primarily involved in regulating hormone production and cell differentiation. For example, activin plays a key role in the development of the reproductive system and the regulation of the menstrual cycle.
So they're like the hormone messengers,
Right.
keeping our endocrine systems in tune.
Exactly. And they're also involved in the development of the nervous system and other tissues.
It's amazing how each of these ligands has its own, unique set of responsibilities, like a well-coordinated team, each member contributing their expertise to keep the body running smoothly.
That's a great way to put it. And it highlights the importance of studying each ligand individually to fully understand the complexities of, TGF-beta signaling.
It's like we've zoomed in on the individual players on a football team.
Yeah.
We've got the quarterback, TGF-beta,
Okay.
the offensive line BMPs,
Right.
and the wide receivers, activins, each with their own, specialized roles.
I like that analogy. And just like a football team needs a good coach to strategize and coordinate their efforts, our bodies have intricate mechanisms to ensure that these TGF-beta pathways are tightly regulated.
Right. We can't have these signals firing willy-nilly. There needs to be some control. How does the body actually regulate these pathways?
Well, there are multiple levels of regulation. At the ligand level, the production and release of these signaling molecules are tightly controlled.
Okay, so it's like having a strict inventory system.
Right.
Making sure there's not too much or too little of each ligand floating around.
Exactly. And at the receptor level, the expression and activity of those type I and type 2 receptors can be modulated.
So the number of mailboxes can be adjusted depending on how much mail needs to be delivered.
That's a good way to think about it. And then there are intracellular regulators that can fine-tune the signaling cascade once the message has been received.
So it's like having quality control checks at every step of the process,
Right.
making sure the message is delivered accurately and efficiently.
Precisely. And this intricate web of regulation, it's essential for maintaining the delicate balance of TGF-beta signaling. Too much or too little activity can have serious consequences, as we've already seen.
It's really remarkable how our bodies have evolved these sophisticated systems to keep everything running smoothly. But, even with all these checks and balances in place, sometimes things can still go wrong. What are some of the factors that can disrupt TGF-beta signaling and lead to disease?
Well, there are a number of culprits, both internal and external. Genetic mutations, for example, can alter the function of proteins involved in the pathway, leading to either increased or decreased signaling activity.
Okay, so it's like having a glitch of the software
Yeah,
disrupting the normal flow of information.
exactly. And environmental factors, such as exposure to toxins or certain medications, can also interfere with TGF-beta signaling.
So our lifestyle and environment can impact these pathways as well.
Absolutely. And as we age, our bodies naturally produce less TGF-beta, which can contribute to the development of age-related diseases.
So it's a complex interplay of genetics, environment, and aging that can tip the scales of TGF-beta signaling and lead to problems. It really highlights the importance of understanding these factors so we can develop strategies to prevent or treat diseases associated with this pathway.
That's exactly right. And it's an area of active research, with scientists all around the world working tirelessly to unravel the mysteries of TGF-beta signaling and its impact on human health.
Speaking of research, we haven't even touched on some of the latest discoveries and therapeutic advancements related to TGF-beta. There's so much more to explore.
There is. And that's what we'll be diving into in our next segment. We'll take a look at some of the most exciting areas of TGF-beta research and discuss what the future might hold for manipulating these pathways to treat a wide range of diseases.
Okay, I'm definitely ready for that. Let's take a short break and then come back for the final installment of our deep dive into the fascinating world of the TGF-beta superfamily. Okay, so we're back and ready to kind of wrap up our deep dive into this incredible world of the TGF-beta superfamily. We've gone through, its roles in development and homeostasis and even how things can go wrong, leading to, various diseases.
Yeah.
But now I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and explore some of the cutting-edge research that's shaping the future of this field. I'm especially interested in the therapeutic potential.
Oh, yeah.
How can we harness this knowledge to actually develop new treatments?
That's a great question, and it's an area that's really buzzing with activity right now. Researchers are exploring all sorts of different approaches to target TGF-beta signaling for therapeutic benefit. You can kind of think of it like, trying to retune a piano that's slightly out of tune.
Okay, I like that analogy. So we're not necessarily trying to, completely silence these pathways, but rather kind of fine-tune them to restore that delicate balance.
Exactly. One promising strategy is developing drugs that can block specific components of the pathway, kind of like placing a mute, on certain keys that are playing too loudly.
So, for example, in diseases like fibrosis, where
Right.
we have, that excessive collagen production, could we potentially block the signals that are driving that overproduction?
Precisely. Researchers are developing drugs that can actually inhibit the activity of TGF-beta itself,
Okay.
or its receptors. And the goal is to reduce collagen production and prevent further scar tissue formation.
It's like turning down the volume on a specific instrument that's overpowering the entire orchestra.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a brilliant way to explain it. What about in the context of cancer, where TGF-beta can actually fuel tumor growth?
Right?
Can we block those, pro-tumorigenic signals without interfering with its tumor-suppressing functions?
Well, that's the tricky part. And it's definitely a major focus of ongoing research. It's like trying to mute the trumpet during, a loud passage,
Yeah.
but allowing it to play softly in the quieter moments.
Right.
One approach that people are exploring is to develop drugs that target specific downstream molecules in the pathway that are specifically involved in those pro-tumorigenic effects.
So it's about being more precise with our targeting, hitting only the bad guys while sparing the good guys.
Exactly. And another exciting area of research is immunotherapy,
Oh, yeah.
which harnesses the power of the immune system to fight disease.
Ugh.
We know that TGF-beta can act as a brake on the immune system. And in the context of cancer, this immunosuppressive effect can be a real obstacle.
So it's like the tumor is using TGF-beta to kind of build a shield around itself,
Right.
hiding from the immune system's attack.
That's a great way to put it. So, researchers are looking for ways to release this brake, to unleash the full power of the immune system against those cancer cells.
I see how that would be a game changer.
Yeah.
What are some of the strategies being explored in that area?
Well, one promising approach involves using antibodies that can actually block TGF-beta, effectively cutting the communication lines that suppress the immune response.
It's like removing that shield,
Right.
exposing the tumor to the full force of the immune system.
Exactly.
Wow, it's like giving the immune system a supercharge.
It is.
That's incredible. Are these TGF-beta blocking antibodies actually showing promise in clinical trials?
They are. There are several ongoing trials testing these antibodies in various types of cancer, and the early results are encouraging.
That's fantastic news. It's really inspiring to see how research is leading to these, like, tangible advancements in treating such challenging diseases.
It is, and the pace of discovery is accelerating all the time. Another area where we're seeing a lot of progress is in understanding how TGF-beta signaling varies depending on the cell's location within a tissue.
Oh, right. We talked about those signaling microdomains earlier.
Right.
So the same signal can have different effects, depending on the cell's neighborhood.
Exactly. Researchers are finding that cells in different locations within a tissue can exhibit very distinct responses to TGF-beta, even when they're exposed to the same ligand.
So it's not just about the signal itself, but also where the signal is being received.
Right.
That adds a whole new layer of complexity, doesn't it?
It does. And this spatial context is really crucial for understanding how tissues develop and maintain themselves. And you know how things can go wrong in disease.
Right.
Imagine trying to understand a city's traffic patterns by only looking at the cars and not considering the roads and intersections.
That's a perfect analogy. So we need to consider the cell's environment, its neighbors, to fully understand how these signals are being interpreted.
Precisely. And researchers are developing new tools and techniques to study these spatial aspects of TGF-beta signaling, which will undoubtedly lead to new insights and therapeutic targets.
It's incredible to think about all the possibilities. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of understanding these intricate pathways.
I agree. We've come a long way since the initial discovery of TGF-beta. But there's still so much more to learn. And as we continue to explore this fascinating world, we'll undoubtedly unlock even more secrets about how our bodies work and how to keep them healthy.
Well, on that note of endless possibility and scientific curiosity, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into this amazing world of the TGF-beta superfamily. It's been an incredible journey. We've delved into, the molecular mechanisms, explored its diverse roles in health and disease, and glimpsed at the potential for future therapies.
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed this dive, and I hope our listener has as well. It's a testament to the power of scientific inquiry and the remarkable complexity of life itself.
Absolutely. And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and left you with a newfound appreciation for the intricate workings of your own body. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those brains buzzing. We'll catch you on our next deep dive into the fascinating world of science.